What it do, y'all? Chase Taylor here with another episode of Tailor-Made Macro. We let others stay on top of markets while we try and get to the bottom of them. I have a great guest for you today, my friend Rupert Mitchell, better known as the Blind Squirrel. Rupert, like myself, is an avid generalist without a formal finance education, but unlike myself, he had a distinguished career in the industry as a sell-side capital markets banker at Barings, Solomon Brothers, Citi, Goldman Sachs, and Jefferies. But as fancy as that and his voice and accent are, Rupert is one of us. Just a guy collecting as many dots as he can every day in the hopes that he can connect a few and find a few good trades every year. Enjoy my discussion with Rupert and then go to blindsquirrelmacro.com and sign up for his awesome research. One note I did want to put out there today, and that was there is not a Between Two Pines segment. Largely because I didn't have time to really prep to get enough in there. Partly because I struggled to find dirt on Rupert, but he accidentally gave me some after we stopped recording, and I'll dig up some more from some friends for the next time I have him on, because I'll definitely have him back on again. As you probably noticed, we're coming off of a multi-month, if not quarter, layoff here, and that's going to be the case at times. My wife and I both kind of working two jobs, both going to school, have a 4-year-old, have a couple dogs, so at this point, I'm just going to do them when I can, and hopefully I'll get more and more off after a big summer lull. Check out pineconemacro.com for some show notes from this show and the past episodes, as well as the research we offer to thoughtful investors. If you're looking for someone to manage your retirement that thinks about macro, geopolitics, trends of the future instead of just slapping in you some alphabet soup of mutual funds, check out Bulwark Capital, where I'm the head of research. By going to Bulwark Capital Management, and that's bulwarkcapitalmgmt.com. All right, on to the show. Rupert Mitchell, aka the Blind Squirrel. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, Chase. Lovely to be on.
All right, before we get going, as everyone knows, we don't allow guests to say anything that resembles good question, because they're all good. So if you do, we'll hit the buzzer, and we'll donate some money to a good cause. What is your charity of choice today?
Well, as a blind squirrel, I'm quite keen on animals that are helpful. So I've got two charities, both based down here in Melbourne. One is the local branch of Guide Dogs Australia, who look after blind people, and also the search and rescue dogs of Australia. These are amazing animals that find people after natural disasters.
Awesome, love that. Speaking of squirrels, we have a little bit of an issue going on in our shed, and we've come to see the relationship between squirrels and pine cones. We opened the shed the other day where we keep our lawnmower and stuff, and there was just huge piles of pine cones that they have been smuggling into our shed and storing up, giant piles. I had to go on Perplexity and figure out what in the world is going on. That's when I learned about how they store these bad boys for the winter. So now I don't have the heart to stop them.
As you can imagine, I am the recipient of quite a lot of squirrel content. Any squirrel videos online seem to get sent my way. There is a brilliant one of squirrels storing, I think it is either pine cones or acorns in some kind of satellite dish.
So maybe this explains why we're friends here. So I'll start out with a really hard hitting question. We'll start out with the hard hitting stuff, and I'll ask you why you like markets so much.
It's kind of weird. I mean, I spent 25 years on the sell side of investment banking, but as a corporate financier, right? And whilst I was on trading floors every day of my life, the actual the business of being in a bank, where I was doing deals, I was doing IPOs, I was doing M&A, and the actual business of trading markets was something that I just observed slightly from a distance. And I realized as I got through my career, in the last 10 years, I was running equity syndicate out in Asia. And so literally pricing IPOs and very much more connected to the trading floor on a day-to-day basis. And I realized that actually it was the daily lifeblood of the markets that probably interested me more than the business of doing corporate deals. So that's how I ended up here.
It's interesting to me. I find a lot of people that like work in the business of markets, especially if they're on the sales side or just, structuring deals. So often if they get into the buy side later and like start, putting capital at risk, for whatever reason, I've found a lot of those people to not be that like creative or like engaging. Like I find you to be, it seems like you have been putting capital at risk for yourself for 30 years, not like you came from that side. Like,
Well, I
how
mean,
do
I
you?
used to put the firm's capital at risk a lot, right?
True.
I sat in a risk seat
Okay.
for pretty much all of my career. Um,
Okay.
yeah, which yeah, it's other people's money. I mean, most people in markets are dealing with other people's money. It is a very different game when you're doing it yourself. But I mean, when your ass is on the line in for firm wide risk, you tend to be pretty focused.
Yeah, well, if you're not, someone is going to get you focused for you. So,
Careers can
um,
get pretty short if you're not.
along the lines of that last bad question I asked, I did want to get into this though. Like, to me, like what really separates you from a lot of other people is like that trade construction creativity. Like, sometimes use options, and I've seen you use options in a lot of different ways, many of which I don't even understand. Sometimes it's like a pairs trade, some thinly traded out years futures contract, an ETF, a single name, a basket of individual names. Um, Talk a little bit about your process for deciding on what vehicle you're going to use after you've kind of come up with a theme or an idea.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's got to be something that pretty much anyone can do with an interactive brokers account or a Saxo Markets account. Um, I shuddered when you said just a moment ago something that I didn't understand myself, because I really, really pride myself on trying to um, lay out and explain exactly what I'm doing as clearly as possible in words of one syllable. So if you if you ever see me not do that, please pick me up. And that goes to any of my readers, by the way. And anyway, I'm always happy to explain. I mean, I spend a lot of time going backwards and forwards on email or on Discord explaining why I've done things. In terms of shot selection, I sometimes write about single name equities, but I'm a one man band. I don't have a team of analysts sitting behind me that are pouring through 10Ks. I tend to start at a high level around a macro theme and then drill down to shot selection. I think actually, frankly, you're quite similar to me on that. I mean, you will always lean into an ETF for a theme or basket for a theme rather than you know going for a sniper shot at a single name equity. Um, some equities just sort of present themselves as unique situations. I've just been must again. I thought I'd won on a
I
Tesla
wasn't going to bring
short,
that
and
up.
but generally, the ETF. Well, I mean, it was staggering. This stat that I came across the other day that there are only, I think it was Brent Donnelly who said there are only 3,500 stocks in the Wilshire 5,000 these days, and there are about as many ETFs these days. I love what the guys at Simplify have done in terms of bringing some of the sort of ISDA-based derivative stuff into ETF formats, so us retailers can use them. Um, the two ETFs that Harley Bassman's put together, the TUA and the
Yeah.
PFIX, phenomenal instruments for retail investors. I mean, that's not a recommendation. There are times when those instruments are appropriate to use, but they're absolutely brilliant additions to the toolkit for retailers. Um, I have a bit of a bugbear about some of the thematic ETFs that we see out there. I mean, I was moaning about in my letter last week about sort of emerging markets funds that have managed to squeeze Nvidia in as a large holding, whereas it's even a top holding. And I'm writing this weekend a piece on space and investing in space. And I was rude about the car company the other day, but what's going on at SpaceX is phenomenal. And I feel out of my depth already talking to a former rocket scientist about space. So we'll move on. We'll move on very quickly. But I'd always, I mean, I was never a sci-fi nerd, and I always kind of regarded the sort of space theme as a little bit of a bright, shiny object designed to remove money from retail investors. But actually, there's a lot of really interesting stuff that's going on there. And, just the boring bit of space, you know, satellite broadband, right, is an enormous business. I'm still just trying to figure out if anyone makes any money from it.
Yeah, that is always the hard part. And I have to talk a little bit about what we said there. Like there are, if you think even 5 years ago, much less 10 years ago, the things you could do with with a mutual fund or an ETF or anything like that, if you were, a an RIA or an individual investor, like it is there's never been a better time to get involved with that stuff. And like you were talking about with like PFIX and Tua, like I don't know what I would do without just those two vehicles. And then if you run down the roster, the Simplify has, there's all kinds of other stuff. We've talked a lot about the convenience store that is Range and all the things that they offer. It has like no money in it. Thankfully, Nukes has gotten some love here lately, so maybe has
What are they
100
up to
million
now?
or something
Have they
now.
got $50 of AUM yet?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. My favorite's LNGs. It's like in the thousands, and I'm like, what?
listen. That's even too illiquid for me.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
small. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, exactly. I put $1,000 in my 401k in there, and I'll probably move it around 10 cents or something. Um, yeah, and that's
but
frustrating
that's
too, though. Like that because not enough people are using them, so they're going to go away. Like country ETFs are the prime example to me. Like Nigeria is a country
yeah.
I've just
Well, we
always
were
had a
both
thing
along
for.
Nigeria, right?
Yeah, and that goes away. Like Egypt went away. There's been a few just in the last year, and that's frustrating.
It's
I
really
want like a
frustrating. I really think the thoughtful ETF providers need to get a lot of shout outs and love from people like us, because there are so many bandits in ETF world. And I find it so frustrating that the guys that are doing a really good job in terms of thoughtful thematic baskets are just not attracting the kind of assets they deserve. I mean, going back to this job I was doing on space. I mean, there are two main ETFs. One of them is Cathie Woods, and that's got John Deere in it, right? And a bunch of right. Um, and ironically, the only thing that's not in Cathie Wood's space ETF is SpaceX. I mean, I know that's problematic to own privates in an ETF, but she's
sure.
got it in a mutual fund. I guess she'll probably just buy a stake in her mutual fund in the ETF or something like that. But
Oh, I'm sure she will.
but that's got $300 million of assets. And then the thoughtful space ETF, which has got this great ticker UFO,
Oh,
um,
that's wonderful.
has only got $35 million of assets, right? But it owns the logical pure play space plays, right? And anyway, it's a sort of continued frustration. But the more that people like us can do to get the word out about the good ones, the better. Because I would
Yeah,
love
absolutely.
LNVZ to be a bit more liquid.
Yeah, I mentioned I think it was Nukes the other day, and the guy from Range like reached out just to be like, "Thank you for putting that in your letter." I'm like, "Geez, if you're reaching out to me, it's got to be hard times for you guys over there." Um, so on your last appearance on the Market Huddle with our good pal Kevin Muir, you mentioned getting married to a trade thanks to early gains. I wanted to pull on this thread some. I've done that, and I've also gotten married to trades that were instantly like bad, like instantly foolish trade. And I'm like, no, 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 the market doesn't understand. Like it's going to come back. So I wanted to talk to us about this trap of getting married to a trade and how we can think about avoiding that in the future.
I I think the second example, right, where you get stopped out immediately of a trade, um, is much easier psychologically, because we've all read our market wizards books. We all know that unless you take your losses early and small, right, it's the fast road to ruin, right? And you actually feel like you're being a good trader when you're disciplined and you stop out immediately, even if you're ending the trade for a couple of days, right? I think that, I think strangely that's easier. Having said that, since I entered into the business of writing about trades, just put 2,500 words together about a trade, you know, getting stopped out of it immediately it feels like a lot of sunk effort. But you can always keep it in the bullpen, right, and come back to it if the chart starts to make sense again. Usually it's just price. Well, price is the only arbiter, but prices can come back, right? But you don't have to be in the trade until they do come back. Now, the other example of an early win is much more dangerous because you know you've got the ego that's come into play. You've made a call, you've been immediately right, and oh, well, everyone expects a bit of a drawdown. We can't expect to get it all at once. All of a sudden, you're flat. And then, the muscle memory of being up 20% in a trade straight out of the gate makes it incredibly hard to walk away. And that's I mean, listen, I'm sure, we've all heard war stories from the greatest traders and investors of them doing the same thing. I just think it's more dangerous when you get the early win.
Yeah, and more painful for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Um, when you turn your screens on in the morning, what is the first thing you pull up each day? Like, what is that? What does that go to?
Well, I have what many would call a disadvantage, but I actually call it an edge in that most of what I do is traded in US hours while I'm sound asleep, right? So I do not have yeah, sure, futures trade 24 hours a day. But at the end of the day, I don't have numbers winking at me all day, every day. So I have a simple process every single morning of I look at an S&P heat map, I look at a futures market heat map, and then I just open up the chart and run through the perhaps probably about 150 tickers that I have on my various screens and just scan through it while I'm drinking my cup of coffee in the morning. Um, in terms of processing information, right? That's actually changing a bit right now. I mean, I'm a zero inbox freak, right? I'm a white inbox guy.
Same.
And I spent 25 years in investment bank deleting emails for 3 hours a day. And it's a tough habit to kick. But um, I've started embracing the world of AI a bit, and I now am redirecting a big slug of my daily email flow and research flow into an AI inbox, which basically produces a high-level content summary of what my overnight dump is in terms of information. Um, I'll give these guys a shout out. It's a London-based startup called Harkster. These guys were on the trading desk for Stone Milliner, the macro hedge fund, and so Darren and Charlie were receiving you know sell side fixed income currency commodities, so like 40 emails a day from each of the 12 investment banks, and their job was to let their PMs know what the street was saying at all times, every time. And they've developed this product, which, answers a lot of the questions. It's getting better and better. They keep on adding features. Um, Now, I still, to my inbox, you know, the letters where I like to read word for word, like your letter, like Kevin's letter, and you know, the people that properly wordsmith their stuff. Uh, that doesn't go into the AI, but all of the Wall Street Journal, the Bloomberg newsletters, and things like that, they all go straight into the AI, and it does a really good job of packaging it all together in a way. Listen, I end up reading most of it in its original format, but um, it allows it allows your inbox to become a searchable database. So you go, okay, I need to have a look at my Mexico trade. That's looking a bit, looking a bit iffy at the moment. What have I received on Mexico in the last 3 days? And I can literally see that at a glance without having to find email,
Yeah, that
which is, I
sounds
mean, that's just a massive productivity hack, and it's brand new.
yeah, that
I mean, I've
sounds
only been using it
amazing.
for about 3 months now.
Now, I think you one of your recent notes, like kind of mentioned it a little bit, and gave them a shout out, and it piqued my interest. I've become way more productive thanks to different AI technologies. I guess in the last like 6 months, whether it's just Perplexity, obviously is kind of my go-to. And for people that don't know, you can like drop PDFs in there and ask it to take a look at it. Just paste a bunch of words in there and ask it about it. Like, so really helpful for like just quick things you want
So
to get through.
I was rude the other day about the podcast generator in Notebook LM, right?
Right.
Because I mean, it kind of I put one of my own letters into it, and the output was 12 minutes of my life I'm never going to get back. But the Notebook LM as a research tool is extraordinary. So let's say you want to tear the hood off a new topic, right? You can go into Perplexity to search for best sources on LNG carriers, right? You'll get 24 websites, a publicly available sort of Morgan Stanley report or something like that. You can drop all of those 30 or 40 items into a Notebook LM notepad, right? And then that becomes your searchable database to interrogate, right?
Well, I
So
love that. Yeah.
you've got a universe of trusted sources, right? Because you have a quick once over of everything that you put in, and the trouble is there's so much garbage on the internet now. Because
Yeah.
you've got listicles from Motley Fool, you've got you know you know you've got stock tickers that have been hijacked by shitcoins on Twitter. There is so much noise. So the idea that you can create some kind of curated walled garden around a topic is just incredibly valuable.
And
The
how you
question for
can
me is that,
go ahead, sorry.
the worry for me is that I'm going to become over reliant on these tools just at the point at which they have to charge fair value for them, because I know full well that, the cost of running that LLM on for that notebook product, you know, it's probably worth thousands a year, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
how many of these tools are you going to be able to afford?
Well, for now, venture capitalists will fund it for us, and then maybe later it will get overfunded by enterprise or something. But I think you're right, and it scares me because I don't want them to know how much I would pay them for some of this stuff. Um, and so I'm gonna enjoy it while I can. And the good news is there's so many of them that eventually and I'm sure it will whittle itself down. Have you used any of the finance specific ones like FinChat or anything like that?
No, I haven't. I haven't.
Yeah, my problem is I keep messing with different ones and trying to figure out which ones I like for different things. But FinChat's pretty sweet. It's good for like earnings and stuff like that. It just puts everything in one place. You can ask their co-pilot any kind of question. You could just be like, how many what's the revenue per employee, and it'll just a few seconds later you got it, and it'll give you a chart of it, and pretty much anything you want to ask about a ticker, it will give you really well.
Hang on, is FinChat was the founder of FinChat? I heard him interviewed on I think it was a Scott Galloway podcast by Scott's partner. I think I heard about I think I heard about this. I'll have a proper look at it.
Yeah, that you're talking about the Harkster, like how they just keep adding features. That every time I get on FinChat, it's wildly different to the point where I'm like, ooh, can you go back like four iterations? I liked it better. So they keep adding stuff and it's getting better. I know that the transcript is doing like a partnership with them and starting to use all their charts and stuff now. But
My
I
concern
mean,
is that so many of these types of businesses are looking at Bloomberg and 35 grand terminals as their end game. They all want to be the Bloomberg killer, right?
yeah, I've
And
been
guess
hearing
what? The
that my whole
Bloomberg
career.
killer is
So
the Bloomberg killer is Bloomberg, right? And the moment they realize that they're losing people, um, they're just gonna start adding features themselves.
you would think, although it's a shocking lack of functionality sometimes.
Or
So
they'll just carry on making their contracts even less flexible. So
yeah, no kidding.
I mean, I had a Bloomberg terminal for 20 plus years, right? And when I left Goldman in 2017, not having a Bloomberg, it felt like a loss of a limb, right? And I have built this toolkit around me, which really works for me at a fraction of the price over the course of the last 5 years, such that, I mean, if someone said, "Oh, I need, it would be really helpful if you were on Bloomberg, and you know what, I'll soft doll you a Bloomberg," I think I might say no, right? Because I don't want to go through that process of loss again. Um, and and actually, with all these additional tools that are available to us now, you know, I don't think I need to go back to it.
You can replace just about everything in one way or another. It may take patchwork, but you just, other than some super specific stuff. I mean, um, question for you: what's the biggest thing you've changed your mind about in the last year?
I was firmly in the crude oils going to triple digits and beyond camp. I mean, that was almost an article of faith for me back in 2020, 2021. Um, that doesn't prevent me from being a long-term bull on the energy sector. But I haven't played around with the front end of the curve for months now. And I'm very focused on um, using long dated crude futures contracts as as an alternative to bonds, as a sort of long dated inflation hedge. And the volatility of those instruments that are further out the curve is just so much lower. But yeah, that was a big one. Um, the Yeah, I mean, that was as close to an article of faith for
That's
me at that point.
that's a big one. I was just listening to Rory from Commodity Context, and he was talking about like how much U.S. production has surprised the market. Like, and it's been like 3, 5, whatever, however many years in a row that it's just like blown expectations out of the water. And I think that's what has wrong footed so many people here in the last few years is like, oh, like peak US, shale, that's right around the corner. And it just, instead right around the corner is like adding a million barrels a day and, a year. So yeah, I'm right there with you. That was a big one for me. The structural shortage and the lack of capex, and it became like a faith with a bunch of core tenants, and then like over time, I kept watching each leg of that stool kind of get kicked out. So right there with you. In fact, I'm frankly bearish for 2025 at least. The way I've explained it is you've come down to needing this war in the Middle East to kind of blow up the world and to truly impact oil supply, or you need the Saudis to basically just subsidize the whole world with keeping their production low. And like that's not an investment case for anything. That if you need one of those two things, and for 2025, I think that's what you need.
And the whole thing about the bull case back 3 years ago was that geopolitics didn't matter. It was just a kicker, right? It just made things
Yeah.
happen faster. It would make things happen faster. If it's now the central tenet of your bull case, that's a problem.
Yeah, and there seems like with the perma bull community, a lack of awareness that's kind of where their bull case has found itself. I'm excited for your answer on this one. What is your favorite book that is more than 30 years old?
Well, I've thought about this because I thought some of your previous guests had really phoned it in and not really tried hard enough
100%.
on the long datedness. So I've gone for something that's over 150 years old. Um,
Whoa.
so everyone everyone talks about Reminiscences of the Stock Operator being the most important book in finance. And you
That's
know
what that
what?
book gets here.
Absolutely, one for the guidebooks there. But that should be. It's a bit like there's a show on the BBC radio called that's been around for like 70 years called Desert Island Discs, right? And famous people choose their 10 favorite songs, the tracks to take with them to a desert island, and then at the end they're asked, they're told that they're allowed to take a book with them, and they're given a copy of the Bible and the complete works of Shakespeare, I think, as a starter kit, so that cannot be their answer, and then they have to choose one book on top. And I think Reminiscences of the Stock Operator is a bit like that when it comes to finance books. But um, if you reach into Russian fiction and Russian literature, Dostoevsky's The Gambler is probably one of the most interesting books on trading psychology. Now, Dostoevsky wrote The Gambler to repay gambling debts. So you've got a pretty good intro there. But and and listen, I think it's sort of slightly reductive to say that trading and investing is like playing roulette. Of course, it's not. It's different to that. But I think some of the gambling psychology reads across both spaces. And there's a matriarchal grandmother figure that there's a brilliant scene in the book when she starts revenge trading, right? And you've seen it a million times in the markets. It's yeah. I mean, it's got so many wonderful nuggets of how things can go badly wrong, and I always think that there's an English gentleman character called Mr. Astley in the book who he's a bit like the sort of non-playing character of the novel, and he sort of observed the behavior of the other characters from a distance. And I think you know my goal in markets is to try and be a bit like Mr. Astley.
That's fantastic. I have not read that. Now I'm super excited to read that. And I'll add, like, I've taken a lot away from, call it, gambling literature, whether it's, obviously Annie Duke. I think a lot of people know,
Yeah,
with Thinking in Bets, but even you can go read some like old, like, poker books from like Brunson Doyle, people like that they're helpful when it comes to thinking about, probabilities, playing the player instead of the cards, all that kind of stuff. So with that said, I'm pretty pumped to read that. And thank you for,
and
you're
also
talking
be
about OPEC.
a way back into fiction as well, because I think that's what all of us find is that fiction's been sort of slightly thrown under the bus since the invention of the podcast and since the proliferation of sort of email and stuff like that. It's very very difficult to find time for fiction.
Yeah, I
There's so
never
much.
find time for it. Yeah, you mentioned like the not being into sci-fi. Like I've probably read 5 fiction books in my whole life. That's how bad I am with fiction. So, that is not because I don't recognize how useful and powerful it can be and how much it can, get your right brain into gear, which is hugely important and for investors, in my opinion. So, it's a lifelong thing where I gotta start reading more of it. But I wanted to thank you for your, like, with OPEC, Iraq's kind of doing their compensation cuts for cheating for so long. I appreciate your compensation for everyone's 10-year-old books. Thank you. um,
Well, I mean,
so
there's been so much good stuff written in the last 20, 30 years. And, you know, I have a stack of books on my side table next to my bed, which just gets higher and higher and higher. Um, constant competition for our time.
Oh, yeah, and hey, we have AI now, so they can help us with a little bit. And so speaking of AI, so you were talking about something earlier, like getting that like sort of baseball card for like an email or an article to be like, do I want to read that? To me, like that's what a lot of what reading is, and this took me decades to actually figure out and perfect. But the whole, if you read 2-3 chapters and it's like not that good, like that old like school student thing, you just like, I have to finish it. Like it's hard to be like, no, like put it away. Like you don't need to read it.
So you
So
know what?
I need AI
I,
to help me fish out bad books.
that's such a life hack, and I'm still not good at it. Right? I mean, my workaround there is that I'm often reading 4 or 5 books at the same time. Um, and so have I actually put that book down for the last time, or is it just part of my work in progress pile? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, you need to be brutal, I think. Um, and if AI can, make allow you to make fewer mistakes by starting on page one, right? Then that's great. But I'd be a bit, you know, listen, I love words, and I love beautifully written things, and so there's absolutely no way that I would allow AI to take me away from source completely.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm afraid a lot of people are going to do that, and that's just messing with, like, that's messing with life to me. I don't know. Like it's a bridge too far. It makes sense for to hack some things, but like you say, there's just too much. I don't know. Words are art. Like you can't get away from them completely. Like I think about, like a random Wall Street Journal article, like whatever. Like you can summarize that for me. But then like someone like Ambrose Evans Pritchard, like I want to read every word he has because he's such a good writer. Even if he writes some silly stuff I don't agree with at times, like the guy's a good
Permanently
writer. So
write silly
I want to
stuff
read
I
it
don't
all.
agree with, actually.
But yeah, there's nothing worse than some of the stuff I wrote 5 years ago. So I hear you. Um, how do you think about if you get a trade right for the wrong reasons? Like, do you have a process for dealing with that? Do you try
No,
to
I'm
coach
completely
yourself back
dishonest
out of
about
it?
that. I'm completely dishonest about that. The I mean, if you think about win rates generally, right? And the greatest investors will freely admit that their win rates are barely over 50%. It's inevitable that you're going to get trades right for the wrong reasons a lot of the time. They just compensate for the ones where you were right but wrong. And I think if you torture yourself too much about that, I mean, listen, the way I deal with it is that there's no way, if I'm right for the wrong reasons, it turns into a conviction call. So at that point, I'm a pure trend follower. And if the trend breaks in any way, shape, or form, there's no excuses. You're straight out.
Yeah, I hear you. And I do not lie to myself about that, although I do about the books thing. There's actually been times where I was 100% convinced in my own head that I finished a book, and then I find it on the shelf with like an old bookmark, 40% of the way through. And it's like, oh man, I told people I read that. Anyway, another question is, do you ever do like, I've heard a lot of traders talk about this, and so I'm always curious if people do it, like kind of a clean slate exercise where you kind of look at your book and you ask yourself if you would buy that all today with everything at those current prices, and then if the answer is no, you cut it loose. Have you ever tried that?
Well, this is the whole Soros thing. He'd get a backache and ring up Goldman and say, "Take it away, take it off my
Right.
hands." And um, I have not done that. Um, you know, that would, I think it would be a massive explainer, right? Given that, we're both in the business of, you know, talking about our investing activity, right? And, to have the courage to say, guys, I'm going to zero, right? I've done that. I've said, listen, I'm just paring back risk on everything. I've done that before, right? But but starting with a clean sheet of paper, I have not. But I do sometimes, because you always have to interrogate whether or not you've got multiple expressions of the same trade on in your book, right? Yeah, it can be as simple as, am I long or short US dollar sometimes, or am I long or short rates? And you do sometimes wake up and go, ooh, I'm I've got I've got too much of the same flavor on. And that you have to rectify.
Yeah, that is a fire drill I feel like we should all run, at least once a month. And it's one that I do not run nearly often enough. And because if you wait for that correlation to one moment, the market will let you know where you're at on that real fast.
Well,
Granted, correlation to
it
one will let
feels
you know everything
personal.
real fast, but yeah.
It feels personal that way. Honestly, you think the market gods have literally got a copy of your ledger in front of them because they're picking everything off. But you just have to accept that it's happening to everybody.
Something I hate to make this like super AI forward show, but I can't help myself. Um, you refer to yourself as AI agnostic, which I like to think of myself as well. I wanted you to kind of go through both sides of that agnosticism. Let's say I'll take the Rupert, hardcore bull case and bear case, and then kind of where you find yourself, today. Because I asked this because I really want to know where you're at, because I find you to be really thoughtful on this question, and frankly, I find it really hard to find thoughtful people on this. It seems like it's nothing but haters and true believers, and I think a lot of people, and hopefully a lot of our listeners, are kind of be desperate for someone that's thought about this and has the courage to stand somewhere in the middle. So what do you think?
Okay. I mean, agnostic is obviously a chicken shit position, right? I mean, in the atheists are
In
braver
this
than
holy war, yeah.
atheists are braver than believers, right? Um, I, from what I've read, I do not believe that the current path of large language models will deliver artificial general intelligence, AGI, or superintelligence. I don't think that LLMs are the stepping stone. However, LLMs that have been created by Silicon Valley are a very, very impressive mechanical Turk, which can deliver some extraordinary productivity gains to people in the knowledge economy. And we've already talked about that. I think that it's existential for big tech to have us believe that these LLMs take us on that path to AGI, because it's the only way that they can justify the capex. And I am in the camp that the chance of capex malinvestment here is incredibly high, which doesn't make the technology a complete waste of time, right? But I think that we could wake up in a few years' time and realize that we've literally rinsed trillions of dollars in pursuit of something that wasn't going to be found down that path. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's not quite the way I view it, but I think it's about as close as that you can get. I think without AGI, the whole thing could still be wildly successful. And I think some of the optimism around what it can do with robotics, with medicine, with materials, like and the combination of all those things at times like can be really special and really really huge for productivity. But I tend to agree with you. I'm not convinced I have the expertise or intellect to understand whether this could lead to AGI or not. But same as you, like what I've read, it is more convincing that no, like that's not how this is going to work. One question for you though is, it seems clear, call it the Mag 7 CEOs are all like all in on this and convinced and like borderline religious about it. it
Well, I
how
think it's
how do you
existential for them. They can't. I mean, it's what's the name of that religious paradox? That's relating to the bravery of atheists, right? It's I can't remember it now, but they can't afford to write off LLMs as a path to AGI because it's existential, right? If someone's going to get to digital God, as the decoder guys call it, the Verge guys call it, it's got to be there. And so they're taking along their shareholders for the ride, whether they like it or not. And right now, big money is on side. If you look at, I mean, the likes of Blackstone are thinking, wow, this is an enormous money pit that we can fill with other people's money. This is brilliant news for the asset gatherers, right? Um, Big tech doesn't have any choice, right? They kind of got to do it. But is there a metaverse moment at some stage? And if there is a metaverse moment, you can be damn sure that there'll be another narrative, right? Which there'll be another narrative that justifies the creation of these nuclear powered data centers all over the countries.
Yeah. So we'll leave with, we talked a lot about what I refer to as dot collecting, like all the things we read and collect and think about. I like to ask people about how they connect dots, like where, how and when and what you're doing whenever you kind of get aha moments and light bulb moments. Um, I think going for a walk, things like that is the answer I get a lot. People get good ideas that way. Or just when you get away from collecting all the dots and you can relax. So how do you go about that? What are you usually doing whenever you find that you have your best ideas?
Um, Usually out walking the dogs, actually. Um, and you know, I, I, I mean, I think AirPods are the best invention ever created. I didn't listen to anything right before they came along, and now I consume so much audio information. Um, in terms of dot collection, well, my process is slightly changing now with the advent of these notebooks. So, I mean, I now have, in the way that I used to have sort of scraps of paper and whiteboards lying around. That's not, and I've now got these sort of, searchable digital archives of themes that I'm constantly posting stuff into. Um, and they become, mini searchable databases on topics from energy to AI to, you know, country themes and things like that. So, I mean, ultimately, yeah, it's in flux, my dot collection process right now in terms of how I do it. Um, but you write a weekly letter, right? God knows how you find time to do that with everything else that you do. But it is quite funny how sometimes I'll wake up on Saturday morning and go, what am I sending to everyone on Monday? And yeah, I'll sit down, control open, and it just comes out because it was in there already, right? It just needed the extra cup of coffee that sort of bursts the 3,000 words, right? Um, Yeah, I mean, listen, to say that there's a sort of a mechanistic process that makes that happen. I couldn't describe it if I tried.
Yeah, I don't think any of us can.
I
And
think
what you were just
it's an output of habits, right?
yeah, well said. Is that Notebook LM that you were just talking about as your yeah, I still have not messed with that and obviously I have to because I just use OneNote right now, which I can't I can control F and that's as far as it goes. So
Yeah, I mean,
I got to play around with
I
that.
think I used the predecessor that was Evernote, and I started using
Yep.
that about 7 years ago, and I thought that was, but it's just so analog now um, compared to what's available in Notebook. Um, Yeah, it's, when they wake up one day and say, "What, this is $1,000 a month," it's going to be a really bad day.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna probably write that check for a couple of these, but that's when I'll give up my terminal subscription. But um,
But I think
let
it's
everyone
particularly
know.
important. The really important point about that is controlling what goes into your archive, right? Because you are putting up a gatekeeper on information. I mean, I think the sad thing about AI is it's going to turn the World Wide Web into a sort of complete trash heap, right? And
More of
it's going
one.
to
Yeah,
become what it already has, right? It's just going to be a world of shilling and listicles and porn bots and things like that. I mean, it's going to be unusable. And so you basically have to create your own library of Alexandria, right? And the great thing is you can do it on topic by topic, right? Someone someone sends you a book recommendation, right? Great. Buy it on Kindle, stick it in the notebook, right? You'll get there eventually.
that's a
But you'll
wonderful
get
way of
around to reading
explaining
the
it.
book eventually, but it's part of your searchable database from today because I've taken it on recommendation from someone I trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the good things one of the things that started me with Perplexity is they will let you like turn on and off things to where you can control the content of like you could be like, look, only look in academic sources, things like that, and which is and only using certain models. It gives you a lot of control that way. It leaves a lot of the junk out because the first few times I used Chat GPT, it was just I mean total dumpster fire. And then the first time I used Perplexity, it was like, oh, okay, well, at least I can control for all this trash, and it shows me where it's getting it from at least. Which don't get me wrong, it still lets some Joker stuff through if you don't really put the controls to it. But I love your library of Alexandria way of viewing that, and it just gets more important every day to do something like that for yourself, and if not for a network of people. So I love that. You should open your own like institute to show people how to do this or something, because that's a great notion.
Oh God, I've got a lot to learn. I haven't mastered the perplexity filters yet, but that's you've just put something onto my to-do list.
Um, yeah, on the heels of this, I'm bad at relaxing. And if you listen to the Cuppy episode, I asked him a bunch about that. So what do you do to unplug, other than take the dog for a walk?
Do you know what? There are lots of things that I'd love to do more of, right? Um, one of the downsides of podcasts taking over our lives is that I don't listen to enough music. And
Guilty.
yeah, I wish I did more of that. It's like fiction and music are things that need rectifying. Um, do you know what? I'm rather bad at hobbies, right? The trouble with an open-ended career that we've both chosen is that you're never done, right? So you might as well adore it. There is always another article to read. There's always another paper to read. There's always another YouTube hit to watch. As it is never ending. So what I find is that actually what I'll do is I'll get up from my desk and you know I'll watch a YouTube show on the big TV. And my partner will come and join me for 5 minutes. Go, why are you watching this? Oh, and actually, it is a form of relaxation. So yeah,
I hear
I mean, I
that.
basically admitted to having no hobbies, because
Same.
this is the ultimate mission creep career.
I knew like we were pretty simpatico in a lot of our habits, but it's gotten a little more intense than I realized here. Speaking of that, what do you know what your Myers Briggs like personality type is?
Oh,
Because now
that's
I
the
feel like
one
it
where you
might be
have
the same.
4 letters, isn't it? I,
Correct.
God, it's been years since I did one of those. I have I'm gonna make up 4 letters in a way that sort of screams American Psycho, aren't I? Is it LMPT or I can't remember.
No worries. I was just curious. I was like, this is getting too real for me. This is very similar. But you're gonna have to check it out one of these days and let me know. Usually we can spot similar personality types rather easily. And I know Myers-Briggs gets a lot of heat, but for me, I took it and then it reads back to you like kind of all your traits. And I was shocked. It was like it absolutely knew me better than I knew myself. So I push back on all the hate Myers-Briggs, test kits. Anyways, enough about all that. Let the listeners know how they can find you, where they can find you, best ways to reach out to access your work and everything.
Okay. So easiest thing, blindsquirrelmacro.com. I'm on Twitter at Squirrel Macro. I write a weekly letter, which is a free letter, and it's standalone. I don't cut off any punchlines. That represents about sort of just under half of what I prepare in the course of every week, and that balance goes to my paid subscribers, and those subscribers are also welcome to join me in a Discord server, which you kindly drop into from time to time, which is kind of operates like a sort of a running scrapbook of what I'm looking at in terms of ideas and themes. If I've written about AI recently and I listened to a great podcast, I'll stick it in the AI channel, say this is the TLDR, but this is worthy of 30 minutes of your time, that kind of thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, most of my readers just lurk in there, but I've got a few that come in and ask questions and contribute ideas as well.
Yeah, I truly cannot recommend enough the Substack and the Discord both, and the best channels, Saddlebags. And if people have read your work, they'll know what that one's about. But yeah, I think anyone that just listened to this will understand like how solid your collection is. So to know that there's a scrapbook you can access to see kind of the daily workflow, like that's worth way more than the price of admission. So highly recommend.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. And for anyone that doesn't know, he's on the other side of the planet while we're recording this, so not always easy to put together. So I appreciate your time
actually,
a great
connectivity
deal.
between Australia and the West Coast is kind of easier than connectivity with London, frankly.
Yeah, I just mean time. Time can be, even time is better on the West Coast too. But still, I appreciate any inconvenience you take to join this podcast and all the hundreds of people that will listen to it.
Well, I'll be one of them.
Thanks so much. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you like it, please tell a friend or give us a shout out. I urge you to go to pineconemacro.com and go to the podcast tab, where you'll find show notes and a lot more about the show, links to books, all that kind of stuff from things we've discussed. And then in this episode, there was a lot of tools that we talked about, so we'll have some links to all that kind of stuff. You can follow the show on Twitter at TaylorMadeMacro, and you can follow me at Pinecone Macro. And just to reiterate, big disclaimer here, nothing on the podcast is investment advice or anything that even resembles investment advice. Speak to a financial professional that can give you detailed personal plan if that's what you're looking for. This show is for information and entertainment only, and we'll be back soon with another show. Thank you.